Charles Dickens's Hard Times is a searing critique of utilitarianism, industrialism, and the reduction of human life to facts at the expense of imagination and emotion. At the heart of this critique stands Louisa Gradgrind, the daughter of Thomas Gradgrind, whose life becomes a tragic experiment in the application of her father's philosophy. Louisa is one of the most complex characters in the novel, simultaneously victim, moral center, and symbol. Through her, Dickens dramatizes the human cost of an education, an upbringing founded on rationalism alone. Role in the narrative. Louisa is introduced early in the novel as a girl whose emotional life has been stifled by her father's relentless insistence on facts. Her imaginative impulses are suppressed. Her childhood is drained of play, fancy, and affection. Alongside her brother Tom, she becomes an exemplar of Gradgrind's educational philosophy. Unlike Tom, however, Louisa retains an underlying sensitivity that later erupts in emotional crisis. Louisa's trajectory in the narrative is shaped by her marriage to Josiah Bounderby, a man much older than herself and entirely unsuited to her temperament. Pressured by her father and influenced by her brother's selfish urgings, Louisa consents to the marriage not out of affection but from a sense of duty and resignation. This decision illustrates the devastating consequences of her upbringing. She lacks the emotional framework to resist or even fully understand what love and companionship ought to mean. Her marriage becomes a site of repression, alienation, and tragedy. The arrival of James Harthouse, a languid politician and admirer of utilitarian philosophy, adds tension to Louisa's life. Harthouse seeks to seduce her, attracted by her quiet beauty and emotional reserve. Although Louisa resists outright infidelity, the fact that she is vulnerable to his attentions underscores the emptiness of her marriage and the deep emotional void within her. When she flees to her father's house to confess her turmoil, she precipitates Gradgrind's moment of recognition. The philosophy of facts has failed, and his daughter's suffering is its most damning proof. Louisa's role is not limited to victimhood. She provides the emotional core of the novel, the site where Dickens most directly stages the clash between fact and fancy, rationalism and feeling. Her suffering is not merely personal but emblematic. She becomes the figure through whom the novel's central critique is dramatized. Symbolic significance. Louisa symbolizes the emotional and psychological cost of a utilitarian worldview. Her inability to express or even recognize her own feelings is not a natural deficiency, but the result of systematic suppression. Dickens presents her as a kind of human experiment, the product of Gradgrind's philosophy carried into practice. Her near collapse under its weight is a symbolic indictment of utilitarianism as a philosophy unfit for human life. Dickens repeatedly describes Louisa as possessing a hidden fire, a metaphor for her suppressed passions and imagination. This image conveys her inner vitality, which remains undiminished despite years of repression. Symbolically, Louisa embodies the resilience of the human spirit. Even when smothered, imagination and feeling continue to burn beneath the surface. Her ultimate refusal to succumb to Harthouse and her emotional appeal to her father demonstrate that this inner fire, though nearly extinguished, can still flare up against the odds. Broader implications. Through Louisa, Dickens critiques not only utilitarian education but also parenting and socialization more broadly. Louisa's tragedy is not entirely her own. It is imposed upon her by her father, society, and the utilitarian ethos of the age. Her inability to resist her marriage or express her feelings is a result of having never been allowed to cultivate those faculties. The broader implication is that a society that denies imagination and affection in childhood produces emotionally crippled adults. Louisa's story also highlights the limitations placed on women in Victorian society. She is given little choice in her marriage, expected to sacrifice herself for family duty, and judged according to her ability to serve as a dutiful wife. While Dickens critiques her father's philosophy, he also exposes the systemic lack of agency afforded to women. Louisa becomes a victim not only of facts, but of gendered expectations. The broader implication here is that women's lives in industrial society are doubly constrained by ideology and by patriarchy. Louisa's suffering is not confined to the private sphere. It serves as Dickens's argument for a new moral framework in society, one grounded not merely in efficiency or facts but in compassion, imagination, and feeling. Her eventual breakdown before her father forces a re-evaluation of utilitarian principles and points toward the novel's moral lesson: that society must balance rationality with humanity. Louisa's plight thus transcends the personal to become a social allegory. Louisa is one of Dickens's more psychologically complex characters. Unlike outright villains such as Bounderby or moral exemplars such as Sissy, Louisa inhabits a liminal space. She is at once repressed and passionate, dutiful and resistant, resigned and yearning. Her silence, reserve, and hidden inner life give her a depth unusual for Dickens's heroines, who are often more idealized. Her refusal of Harthouse is particularly significant. Though she is tempted, Louisa ultimately demonstrates integrity and moral strength. Her choice illustrates that despite her flawed upbringing, she possesses an innate moral compass. In this sense, Louisa represents not just a victim but also a quietly heroic figure, one whose strength lies in resisting destruction by the forces arrayed against her. Conclusion: Louisa Gradgrind is one of the most important characters in Hard Times, both narratively and symbolically. In the story, she is the daughter shaped by her father's philosophy, the wife trapped in a loveless marriage, and the woman nearly seduced into moral collapse. Symbolically, she represents the human cost of utilitarianism, the resilience of suppressed imagination, and the limitations placed on women in Victorian society. The broader implications of her character extend to Dickens's critique of education, industrialism, and gender roles.